Hi there, good morning, good afternoon, good night, whatever it is. This is a quick little recap. I've been told that the article about the U.S. foreign policy, all that history, is a little longish. And so this is the TLDR edition. If you just want to hear about it real quick, here you go. If you already did the quiz and or the assignment on Office 365, great. Go back and check it maybe. Some of the assignments I'm getting on Office 365, not so good. So if you don't like a grade, you can do it again. If you haven't done it yet, well, lucky you. You can hear a lot of the stuff here. And you know what? I'm going to go right along it. So if you want to follow along on your piece of paper, go ahead. I'm going to pause for a second. No, wait, you can pause this video. So if you need to pause it, go ahead. I'll be here waiting. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, to start off, the first time the U.S. really got involved with a foreign war, of course, after the Revolutionary War. We already talked about that. Was the Barbary War? We were actually fighting pirates, not another country, but pirates. This is all true. Not Captain Jack Sparrow, no, but pretty bloodthirsty people from northern Africa that were attacking ships in the Mediterranean Sea. The U.S. could have paid a bribe to get them to cut it out, but we said no, we're not going to do that. So President Jefferson got Congress to use that money instead of a bribe to make a navy. We went and actually kicked their behinds there, but it took like 3 years. That wasn't a real country we were fighting against, but we won, and that was awesome. And America, good job. Next one was the Louisiana Purchase, not a war. Also President Jefferson, actually, bought a big old chunk of land from Napoleon, the Emperor of France, because France needed money to go fight Britain, because they're always fighting Britain for many years. So we bought this huge chunk of land. Didn't even know it was out there yet. But eventually we figured it out. And, you know, look at the size of that thing. It's a huge chunk of land, not just the current state of Louisiana. Next one is the War of 1812. It's kind of the rematch of the Revolutionary War, kind of, sort of. The British were fighting France, as always, and started taking some of our ships because we were trading with France. We didn't like that and declared war. And the U.S. thought, hey, maybe we can take over Canada. This is true. We fought battles near Montreal trying to take over Canada. Now we get along with them so well. Even though Montreal wants to steal the raid, so maybe that's payback. Wow, I never thought of that till just now. Anyway, the war was pretty much a tie. Neither side really won. Both sides got sick of it, and now we've been friends with Great Britain ever since, even though they did burn down the White House, and that was not cool. Next up, this is not on your list, actually, but I should have thrown that in there. The U.S. bought Florida from Spain in 1819, and we actually took over Florida in 1821 for $5 million. All that was down here was mosquitoes and alligators, but also there were Seminoles, and I'll get into that later, so I'm not going to talk about that right now. But yeah, that's when Florida was purchased, so that's why you're suddenly seeing it appearing on U.S. maps. We bought it in 1890. The Monroe Doctrine is also not a battle. This is when President James Monroe was just giving his annual State of the Union speech and mentioned that, hey, we're not going to mess with anything in Europe, and Europe don't mess with anything on this side of the world. He didn't call it the Monroe Doctrine, but it got called that by history books later on. And that really set the stage for the American foreign policy for a really long time. We were isolationists. We weren't messing with their business. They don't mess with our business. That's how the U.S. ran things for almost 100 years, basically. So that's why the Monroe Doctrine was important. It was just a speech, but it kind of said, hey, here's what we're going to do. And later presidents tended to follow that for a long time. The Mexican War, we fought against Canada and Mexico years ago. Isn't that weird? We don't think of that these days. Mexico used to be way bigger than it is, and then it started with a dispute over Texas. It ended up, as you see on this map, with battles all over the place. And the U.S. ended up taking over Mexico City to force them to surrender. And they did, and gave up about a third of Mexico, became part of the U.S., including California, Texas, all out there out west. And the U.S. won that. Again, that's not a war against European countries. It was against a relatively new country of Mexico. And we sort of kind of buddies. Get it. Next war, this is the Civil War. You'll learn a ton about this next year in 8th grade U.S. history. But to recap, the country split north against south, mainly over slavery. And it was a horrible war. After about 4 years, the northern side, the United States side, won, obviously, and reunited the country. You'll learn a lot more about that next year. It was pretty bad, though. All right, the Spanish-American War. You see there's a little line here coming out of Tampa. Yes, because Tampa, teeny little Tampa at the time, Henry Plant knew people in the U.S. Department of War, now known as the Defense Department, and got Tampa named one of the main places where all the soldiers would show up, get everything together, and then go down to fight. And so Tampa was completely overrun. There were way more U.S. soldiers in Tampa than there were residents of Tampa. In 1898, when this was all going on, Tampa Bay Hotel, now known as the University of Tampa, was completely full. All those rooms for the only time ever, as a lot of soldiers and officers and politicians and newspaper writers were all here getting ready to go down to Cuba. So anyway, Cuba was a Spanish colony at the time, and the U.S. kind of picked a fight a little bit with Cuba, with Spain, and threw them out of Cuba. So we didn't take control of Cuba, but we did take control of Puerto Rico, and also not shown on this map, we also fought a battle on the Philippines, way across the world, which was also a Spanish colony at the time, and we took control of that too. The Philippines were an American colony until after World War II. The Filipinos weren't too happy about that, but again, that's something you'll cover in U.S. history next year, I hope. Maybe. We'll see. Anyway, Spanish-American War, that's the first time the United States actually took on a European country and won. Didn't fight to a tie. We kicked Spain's butt, basically, and threw them out of Cuba. So there you go. Next one, the World War One. This is map. This map is Europe. You don't see the United States on it because it was mainly a European conflict. You see some of those countries on this map are now gone. Ottoman Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and some of the different sizes. The world has changed a lot in the last 100 years. So we got in at the last part, helped Great Britain and France, the other Allied powers, to fight against the Central Powers and helped win that war. So the U.S. was involved near the end. The U.S. was heavily involved with this war. This is an animated GIF, so you can kind of see a change. Black are the United States' enemies, the Axis powers. The light blue does the Allies. You notice the United States was not light blue because we were not involved until late 1941. And black, those are, like I said, that's the Axis powers and places they took over. The Soviet Union is in red. At first, they actually had an agreement with Hitler not to fight each other, but then Hitler attacked them, so they joined us with the Allies to help fight back. It was horrible. It went all across the world, fighting everywhere. The United States fought two wars at the same time. A really big deal. But our alliances with Great Britain and Soviet Union, that's how we won the war. With help, we won the war with a little help from our friends. That's a Beatles reference. I don't know if you get it. And against Japan, we fought as well with some help from China and from Australia, but mainly the United States out in the Pacific Ocean. And eventually, we won the war, and there you go. Really big deal. After this is when the U.S. really stepped up, helped create nations to try to make it so we didn't have another big war like that. We have not had another big war like that. The world has been, like I've said before, relatively peaceful, especially in the last 20 years or so. We have less wars right now than we ever have, which is cool. Even though it's strange times, at least we don't have to worry about that. And the UN has kind of helped do that, bring all the countries together to kind of talk things out. And it doesn't always work, but it has been a help. Next thing, the Cold War. Okay, I'm going to kind of combine some things here. The Cold War was a really long rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, mainly, over a lot of things. We're a capitalist democracy. They were a communist totalitarian government, and they kind of pushed in to try to take over other places after World War II. And after that, they tried to spread communism, saying this is the best way to go. And the United States said, no, that's not the best way to go. And so it was a fight over hearts and minds as we tried to get other countries to join our team. And part of that was, all right, containment was the idea that we got to contain communism, don't let it spread. You can't attack the Soviet Union because they have too many nuclear missiles and too big of an army, so you can't do that. But you can contain the spread of communism. You can't stop them. You can only hope to contain them. That's what we said. And so two wars that came out of that were in Korea and Vietnam. They're a little confusing, I suppose, because North and South, both of them. In both of them, the North side was communist and the South side was not communist, kind of our buddies at the time. And they had different outcomes. In North Korea, we helped the South Koreans and they fought back and forth. And eventually, they signed a truce, a ceasefire, saying, no, let's put the line right back where it was before the war started. And that's where it still is. So that conflict really never finished. In Vietnam, we helped them for many years. The war became really unpopular by the late 60s, so the U.S. pulled out in the early 70s. And then North Vietnam, after we left, the communists in North Vietnam ended up taking over South Vietnam. And so Vietnam is now just Vietnam, not North or South anymore. And it is a communist country, but it's not really totalitarian. There's more freedom there than you might think. But yeah, so these two wars were about containment, saying communism should not spread. And it kind of worked in the Koreas. It didn't really work in Vietnam, even though we tried, and a lot of people got killed there, Americans trying to fight that war, and it didn't really. All right. Also in the 60s, there was trouble in Cuba. The man, I messed up the map, but underneath those little fingers is Cuba, and down there, two things happened in the early 60s. One, the Bay of Pigs. Castro had taken over Cuba. He started turning the country into a communist country. The United States did not like that. That was a problem with containment. So President Eisenhower, he had this idea to send some people that had fled from Cuba to go back and attack and throw Castro out. And then President Kennedy got elected in 1961 and said, all right, sure, let's go with that plan. Actually, technically, he was elected in 1960, but he became president in 1961. There, I clarified. But it was a complete disaster. The Bay of Pigs invasion was a disaster. The people we sent on there weren't trained that well. They didn't have great equipment, and the U.S. wanted to pretend like we were not involved, but clearly we were. So when the attack was going badly, John Kennedy, the president, said, "No, I'm not going to send in the Air Force because then we're going to really be fighting, and that's going to start a war." So it was a big embarrassment. It ended badly. Afterwards, Castro said, "Well, geez, if the United States is going to attack me, I'm going to get buddy-buddy with the Soviet Union." So he did, and they sent missiles down there secretly. The United States found out and was really freaked out. It's right there, 90 miles away. They can easily hit anywhere in the eastern U.S., especially, I mean, in Tampa. The missile would be here in like something like 90 seconds to 2 minutes. I mean, they move pretty quickly. So there would be no defense against that. So Kennedy said, "Get those missiles out." And the leader of the Soviet Union, Khrushchev, said, "No, I'm not." And so for 3 days, they stared at each other with their fingers on the nuclear button, ready to blow up the world. Eventually, the Soviets backed down. They took their missiles out, and yay, America. And we didn't all blow up, which is good because otherwise I wouldn't exist, and neither would you. So yeah, I guess that's a good thing then, isn't it? Many things happened in the Middle East after that. Really quick now, in Iran, we supported the old leader of Iran called the Shah of Iran, kind of like a king. He wasn't very popular though, and they had a revolution. And eventually, he came to the U.S. for some medical treatment because he had cancer. And people in Iran were furious that we had protected that guy again. And so they stormed the United States embassy, took some hostages. This is in 1979. Um, and the president, Jimmy Carter, we couldn't negotiate them out, and he tried to send in a special forces unit to go get him out, and there was a crash in the desert. It was very embarrassing and also very bad because some soldiers were killed there in a helicopter crash, and it looked like the U.S. couldn't do anything to get them out. It was really embarrassing, and he lost the election in 1980. Jimmy Carter did, kind of because of that. Eventually, they worked out a settlement and they got let go. Later on in Iraq, right next door, the leader of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, invaded the country of Kuwait, which is on this map too, but it's kind of teeny, mainly to get the oil there. And this was in 1989, 1990 when this was going on. The president at the time, President George Bush Sr., the dad of the two Bushes, said that no, we can't have that. So between the UN and some of our allies, we got to force together and shove them back out of Iran. That was the first, out of Kuwait. That was the first Gulf War. Then after that was, of course, 9/11 attacks, which was most of the attackers were from Saudi Arabia. They trained in Afghanistan, both on this map. Um, so after that attack, the United States went after the bases they had trained in Afghanistan. And we're kind of still there. The United States has been kind of slowly trying to pull troops out, but it's been a long time. And we still have troops in Afghanistan after that. We did clean up all those terrorist bases, though, at least. After that, Iraq comes back again with Saddam Hussein. That we had some indication that perhaps he had weapons of mass destruction, big bombs and such that could be used in another horrible terrorist attack. So the U.S. in 2003 went in and invaded Iraq. It turns out he didn't have anything, but he was not a good guy, and his people kind of captured him, put him on trial, and executed him. So not really popular in Iraq was Saddam Hussein. It took a while to rebuild that country, though, because they had not had freedom in a really long time. So we had to stay there for quite a while. And there still are a few U.S. forces in Iraq right now, but they have an elected government that's kind of sort of working decently, not great right now. So the Middle East has been a place where we've had issues, and that's only a few of them. I'm leaving out some smaller ones. We've had some issues there since World War II, really, because a lot of these countries used to be colonies before World War II of European countries, and they became independent after that. And it's not always easy to get a country going like that. And there's been a lot of squabbles between them, and then also between Israel and their neighbors in there. So it's kind of a messy place, and it has been ever since World War II, basically. All right, so let's recap the whole thing here. So the U.S. foreign policy has changed over the years. In the early days, up until around 1900 or so, we were very isolationist, which means we didn't mess with other countries don't mess with us. The Monroe Doctrine kind of explains that. Later on, in the early 1900s, we're starting to break out of our shell, getting involved a little bit, little baby steps. Fought against Spain, got in, uh, but but when World War One started, we did not get involved until we were attacked directly. And even after World War One, the United States like, all right, that's it, let's pull back, let's not get involved. When Hitler was running over Europe in 1939, 1940, the United States did not want to get involved until we were attacked, and then we did get involved in World War Two. And ever since World War II, we have been a world leader, one of the two superpowers along with the Soviet Union. Now you could argue we might be the only superpower, even though China's coming up too. But we're definitely have been a world leader ever since World War II, and that's where we are right now still. So there's your quick recap. I know it's taking like 17 minutes, but you know, it's faster than reading it maybe. So if you hear it and you read it, maybe you get it. Some of this stuff you'll cover in American History next year. Some of this you won't. So quick preview, in a couple of weeks, we will run through the Cold War in detail with all kinds of cool videos and such. I hope you're interested. If not, well, you're going to have to do it anyway, so sorry. So try to get interested, and we'll cover more recent U.S. history, because you will not get this in school. You just won't until high school. Um, yeah, even you might not even get it in high school. Sad but true. So I'll try to tell it to you so you will know, because knowledge is power. Anyway, there's your recap. Get your stuff done, and I'll talk to you later. When coming soon, probably we'll have a couple of video jokes just to break, all this monotony of wars and stuff. Talk to y'all later. Adios.